Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm Claire Pride. Today we're focusing on the Russian doping scandal, which has resulted in a much smaller Russian delegation at the Rio Olympics. Scores of Russian athletes only finding out their fate this Thursday, one day before the official start of the Games. Now, the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, was under pressure to impose a blanket ban on the Russian team after a probe by the World Anti-Doping Agency found evidence of state-sponsored doping. But it said individual sports federations could decide who to exclude from the Games. However, as the competition drew nearer, the IOC said a panel of 3 of its members would have the final say, some athletes having appealed their exclusion to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is still examining many cases. Time now to introduce you to my guests. They are Andy Brown. He joins us from the UK. He is the editor of the Sports Integrity Initiative. Hello, thank you very much indeed for your time. Also joining us, Elena Jakova, a freelance track and field writer. Hello, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, if I could start off with you, Andy, what's your reaction to that press conference Thomas Bach just gave? We're expecting some figures. Instead, we're hearing from Russia that it's probably going to be about 270 athletes. That's about 2/3 of the team banned from competing. Andy Brown appears to be having trouble hearing me. Elena, can you hear me, Elena?
Yes, I do.
All right. Well, then I'll start off with your reaction. We don't have any specific figures. What we do know, what we already knew going into this press conference, was that the entire track and field team won't be competing, bar one person. What's your reaction?
I've worked at the All Russia Athletics Federation for many years, until 2013. So it was definitely hard for me to accept this decision because, first of all, I just feel for some athletes that I know, and I know they're clean. But at the same time, some athletes that I thought were clean turned out to be implicated in all of those reports, although we're still lacking some proof, I guess, the solid proof, such as like positive tests or something like that, more evidence. But anyways, I still think that track and field or athletics turned out to be a scapegoat in any case. They were just a little unlucky in terms of timeline that they got drawn into it early on, plus the IWF was implicated too in corruption. That's why it had such a huge effect on them. But now, after McLaren's report, we see that it was actually a situation that was across all sports. But Russia didn't get a blanket ban. Only athletics got the blanket ban because IWF did not change the decision after the McLaren report was issued.
Do you think there should have been a blanket ban on the entire team?
I don't think it should have been, because I think it's just really bad for the sport. It doesn't help a situation. It only aggravates it in terms of that sport just won't be, on the radar at all in the country. But I think that if it was a blanket ban, it would have been more fair than just the track and field ban. Because the track and field athletes, they did get a blanket ban within the team, which is definitely not fair, because there definitely are clean athletes. And the worst thing that is not just the Olympics, but the youth and the junior teams got banned from the European Championships and the World Championships. And this is just insane, because those are kids in the age where they decide whether they want to pursue sport or not. I don't think that 16, 17-year-old kids are doping anyways, because it's more like an amateur level at that point of time anyways. And they were not allowed to go anywhere and compete. And it just, if we don't know when the ban for the Russian team ends, and it just, I don't know, athletics is not popular in Russia at all. It struggles for attention, and it just makes it even worse. The sport might die after this.
All right, turning now to Andy. I believe we have been able to fix the sound issues. Andy Brown, thank you very much for joining us from the UK. Now, just before coming to you, we were listening to Thomas Bach. He was giving a press conference in Rio de Janeiro. We were hoping for some figures after the IOC set up a panel to examine a certain number of cases. We didn't get any. We're hearing from Russia that it could be as many as 270 athletes banned.
Yeah, it could. I'm not sure about that. 270 athletes banned. The indications we've got is
cleared. I'm sorry, cleared.
Sorry, yeah. That sounds a lot more accurate. The indications we've got is that most Russian athletes will be allowed to compete. It's very difficult in areas such as team sports. If somebody's implicated in the report, do you then ban their teammates? Is Russia then allowed to select another teammate to replace them? There have been sort of different implementations of how that will work from different international federations. And there's going to be a lot of confusion over how to implement the IOC directives. In fact, the IOC issued a letter to the international federations only on the 2nd of August, explaining further details on how they should implement people who are implicated in the report, how they should treat them and how they should ban them. And this created further confusion. Some federations had to go back, basically, on recommendations to ban people, and they've now decided that they want to include these people.
That's the thing. It's been a very complicated process and a very long one. Thomas Bach said that the IOC had given very strict eligibility criteria, but that doesn't really appear to have been the case. It was misinterpreted.
Yeah, it was clear in their eyes, but they didn't issue enough information to the federations, who faced confusion about what to do. I mean, we've seen rowers who, obviously you've got more than one person in a boat. One person's implicated in the report. They faced a ban. The other person in the boat is therefore effectively banned because they're part of a team. They then can't compete because of the actions of one of the two rowers, and that's unfair on the athletes. There's going to be a lot of athletes here who are going to be excluded for having done nothing wrong. And they've got a case against the sporting bodies who have failed effectively, in my view, to communicate this correctly to the international federations.
What about those who've taken their cases, though, to the Court of Arbitration for Sport? We've seen a few rulings, but there's a backlog, isn't there? So it will be too late for some athletes. Yeah,
it will be too late for some athletes. I mean, I was looking at boxing earlier today, and the Russian boxers are all in Rio. Yet there isn't a decision yet from the Boxing Federation about whether those boxers can actually take to the ring. So we're still waiting on quite a few of those. Another good high-profile example is Yulia Efimova, the swimmer. She still, as far as I know, still doesn't know whether she can compete.
Just turning back to you, Elena, you were talking before about the damage to the reputation of the sport, track and field. You said that it already doesn't have a very high profile in Russia. Of course, we've seen the damage done to cycling because of doping. Are you worried now that everyone's just going to assume that athletes competing in athletics aren't clean?
Yes, I'm definitely worried that that's something that might happen. And the other side of it is that if you don't have anywhere to compete, it's just not, they won't be able to make a living. So people just won't go to track and field. They won't, it's so hard for this sport. In track and field, kids start at age 9 or 10. And by that point already, most of the athletic kids are taken by soccer, figure skating, gymnastics, a lot of sports. So it already struggles to draw attention. And now it's going to get even worse because we don't know when this ban is going to end. There is no, it wasn't just the Olympic ban. It's just a ban of Russian athletics that doesn't have a timeline until Russia fixes whatever it's supposed to fix, which is also very vague and ambiguous. So I'm definitely worried about it. And track and field has already not been popular in Russia. It has never been. And it's going to make it even worse.
And if I could just turn back to you, we had Michael Phelps, the American swimmer. He said that he can't be sure he's ever competed in a completely clean sport. His coach said the system is broken. Thomas Bach saying from Rio de Janeiro earlier that from now on, if I understood correctly, the IOC won't be sanctioning. It'll be handled by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. What do you make of that? Because some people are saying the Court of Arbitration for Sport has been made to look bad in this situation.
I don't think so, really. I mean, there's a few things going on here. I mean, it's a sign, really, I suppose, that the IOC doesn't have faith in the ability of sport to handle anti-doping, I suppose. However, you've got to remember that the International Court of Arbitration for Sport, which runs the Court of Arbitration for Sport, is funded by the IOC and was funded for a very long time solely by the IOC. And it's now funded by sport and the federations. So I don't know whether there's too much to read into that, because the sanctioning will effectively still be controlled to a certain degree by sport. However, it shows that perhaps a shift in perception that sport cannot sort this mess out on its own. It needs someone external with expertise to come in and sort it out.
Because isn't WADA half funded by the IOC as well? And that's led, for example, the former Canada ice hockey player Hayley Weikenheiser to say that there are too many conflicts of interest within the different bodies.
There are quite a few conflicts of interest and quite a lot of hats that are worn by different people in many different organisations in this area. I mean, the WADA one's an interesting one, because when WADA was first set up, it was supposed to be a kind of commission of the IOC. However, what happened is they decided they wanted something more external, and governments wanted to get involved. And so it was decided to sort of fund it 50-50 by the IOC and by the governments. Now, its budget for 2016 is something like $23 million US. And the TV rights to the Olympics in the US alone are worth over $1 billion. Now, given that it appears that WADA is calling out for more money, and it hasn't been able to solve these problems. I mean, it was told in 2010, 2012, 2013 about the issues in Russia, yet it did nothing. Given that it did nothing, should it not have been given more money by the IOC perhaps to solve these issues?
The IOC says that it certainly could have acted a lot sooner. WADA, though, saying that it took a lot of time to corroborate all this evidence. Now, if I could just turn back to Elena, how do you feel about Russia hosting major sporting events now that there's been this huge doping scandal?
I think that they should figure out the whole compliance thing first. Of course, there cannot be any talk about us hosting something while we don't have a compliant anti-doping body. Once that's solved, I think that's fair game. I don't think that the World Cup, which is the next biggest event that we're hosting in 2018, is a huge problem in that regard, because we all know that in major team sports, anti-doping is not very efficient around the world. It's not the matter of people doping or not. It's just the matter of people not getting tested properly, getting tested worse than in individual Olympic sports. So I don't think that it's a problem, but at the same time, there is I understand that there is a conflict of interest. I have been out of country for a couple of years, so I can't, speak for Russians. But the Mutko, our sports minister, he is also Russian Football Union CEO or something like that, director, and he is highly involved in that tournament. So people were saying that he's not going to leave his position as a minister of sport because of that, which I think is wrong.
And Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, he's made it very clear how he feels about all of this. He's condemned, obviously very upset about the fact that any Russian athletes could be excluded from the Games. He said that them not taking part, or part of the team not being there, is certainly going to make a difference. Andy, this brings me to politics. Earlier, Thomas Bach said justice must be independent of politics. What do you make of the IOC's behaviour when it comes to politics? Do you think it has been political in the way it's handled this particular scandal?
Yeah, I think it has been political. I mean, these things always are. But I mean, coming back to the Russian World Cup, I just want to make a point on that. One of the allegations was that Mutko had covered up a positive doping test of a leading Russian footballer that plays in the Premier League, the Russian Premier League. Now, if he's heading the Russia 2018 bid, why was he not included in the investigation launched by the Russian Ministry of Sport? Everyone else implicated in the report was, apart from him. Something needs to be done about that ahead of the 2018 World Cup.
Do you have a theory on that?
Well, I'm hoping that FIFA will take a lead. I presume he wasn't investigated because he leads the Ministry of Sport, and so he's not going to investigate himself. But, this is an example of the politics that you referred to that do go on in all of this. And the IOC and the WADA and everyone else involved want to be seen that they're doing the right thing. Now, there's a certain amount of information in the Independent Commission report that implicates WADA. For example, they apparently told Rodchenkov that they were coming to examine his laboratory, and he then went ahead and destroyed 8,000 samples, which could have then been used to, pursue anti-doping rule violations against Russian athletes. WADA was culpable for that. They told him they were coming. But yet the WADA report doesn't really examine WADA's own failings in any of this. The IOC hasn't really explained its own failings in any of this. What is actually needed in all of this is an independent investigation into what went on, who knew what, when they knew it, and what happened next.
I'd just like to, Andy, talk about a couple of other issues quickly. We've seen some protests in Brazil, notably because of the cost of hosting such an event. Many cities, it seems, put off for that very reason. Do you think that because it's hardly ever profitable, this isn't boding well for the future of major sporting competitions?
I do actually, yeah. I've heard theories in the past that we should have a kind of rotation system involving ancient Greece, etc., and it should go round between various cities that can afford to host it. However, the danger with that is it excludes, non-rich cities, if you like, non-Western sort of established cities from ever hosting the Olympic Games. But it's a difficult one because it can be a financial disaster, as we've seen from past Olympics. And
one more point, is it even really a competition where we see the best of the best? I mean, we talk about football, golf, tennis. They're not necessarily aspiring to get Olympic medals.
Well, not only that, I've seen a number of reports and evidence that sporting federations often don't select the best athletes that they could put forward. They select the athletes that, politically suits them to put forward, the ones that are coming through the development programs, the ones that they've invested money in, not necessarily the ones that have achieved the best results. So, politics plays a part in that as well.
All right, Andy Brown, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Andy Brown, the editor of the Sports Integrity Initiative. Also with me for the debate, it was Elena Jakova. Thank you very much for joining us from New York City. And thank you to all of you for watching the debate. That's it for now.